Awesome. Wow, that was exactly timed as the music stopped, or I just started talking over the music. I can't tell which one, but I'm going to go for the former. So, in the interest of time, and I know that everybody's taking time out of their busy days to meet with us today, we're going to get going and kick off with the second stop on our roadshow today. So, before we launch into the slides, just want to say a huge welcome to everybody who's joining. I can see there's lots of different people from across the US, and we're so excited to have you here. As you can tell from my accent, I'm not currently based in the US. I'm based out of London, but really looking forward to co-presenting the session today with my panelists, Angel and Yaya. Before we get started with the presentation, just a couple of house rules. I know that, or I'm sure that everybody is very familiar with Zoom and how it works, as we've been using it in our daily lives for months now. But a couple of tips. We have a chat area of the webinar where you can post messages and you can ask questions. One thing I would recommend is just changing the settings to include all panelists and attendees. I think it might be defaulting to all panelists, which means that we can all see your lovely messages. And by all means, feel free to send messages just to us if necessary. But if there are general things you'd like to post or comments you'd like to make or just conversation you'd like to start, then just make sure you've got the right settings so that it's going to the right people as well. I think Maria is going to be coordinating our slide changes today. So I'm hoping that she's going to switch to the next slide and we can get going. Oh, just like magic. Well, I think I've covered most of this, but a huge welcome to everyone on the roadshow. I know that everybody, or a large number of people, joined for the first session that we hosted yesterday, which was amazing, all about virtual events. And it was great to see so many people there taking some tips and sharing best practices and advice with one another as well. But today, Maria, if we could switch to the next slide. Today, we're going to be on stop 2, which is all about enrollment marketing strategy. This is the second stop of 5. And over the course of the next 4 days, including today, we're going to be covering a series of strategic topics, which are all designed to provide kind of tips and advice and best practices for people who are reacting and adapting to this new world that we're living in. There is so much going on right now that is causing a lot of stress and uncertainty for universities and for students all around the world. And so with each of the topics, we're hoping to provide some real guidance and support to you that you can take away and kind of incorporate into your day-to-day activities at your universities. So tomorrow is all about communicating with international students, thinking about how you can build up those relationships and really cultivate strong connections to students all around the world that is kind of authentic and accessible. And then on the day 4, we're going to be talking all about ambassador programs. This is definitely something that the Unibuddy team have lots of experience in, and I know we're going to have some great input from one of our university partners, Cornell Tech. They're going to be sharing their hints and tips for how they've recruited and trained a diverse range of ambassadors for their particular program. And then on day 5, it's that hot topic, improving yield. This is and remains such an important part of every recruitment cycle, even more so now in light of everything that's been going on. So we're going to be sharing our hints and our tips and guidance and best practice on how you can improve and boost your yield using a range of different tools and features. Maria, could we switch to the next slide, please? So as I mentioned before, today we're talking all about utilizing conversational insights, and in particular, how you can use insights and knowledge about your students to really drive and tailor your marketing strategy. Oh, there we go. And so I'm going to start talking for a while because I realize I've been waffling on for a while now, and I'm going to allow our lovely panelists to introduce themselves. So first of all, we have Yaya from Unibuddy.
Hello, everyone. So thank you for that, Amy. I currently lead the user experience of the company. This means that I try to ensure that we create products that provide meaningful and relevant experiences to all our different users. And of course, what's nice about working at Unibuddy is we have many different types of stakeholders that we have to keep in mind, from the prospects, applicants, current students, and different staff members in different types of universities. So my goal of the company is to ensure that we're working to produce services and products that satisfy them. And as an international student myself, I could have really benefited from Unibuddy back in the day. So I'm proud to work for such an important cause.
Thanks, Yaya. And Angel.
Yes, great to meet everybody. And I've spent the past 10 plus years working on the admissions, marketing, developing systems and developing teams that can help universities, both state, public, private, small schools, build their marketing recruitment strategy. I was also a road warrior, so I spent a lot of time on the road doing fairs, working with agents, sourcing third-party marketing companies in country to help build in-country strategies and just improve recruitment and enrollment. So I'm very familiar with what a lot of the universities are going through and just different strategy. I've learned a lot along the way, so I'm happy to share that with everyone.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And I don't know if I even introduced myself at the beginning, but my name is Amy Downs, and I'm currently heading up our customer success team for the US, specifically at Unibuddy. What that essentially means is that me and my team are responsible for supporting all of our US university partners, helping them to onboard and implement and manage their platforms, also to recruit and train their student ambassadors. Really all aspects of getting set up on Unibuddy is our responsibility. And we really enjoy working with so many universities, and a big hello to everybody here today who is part of our partner base, and maybe even some of our future partners as well. And before joining Unibuddy, I worked in admissions as well on the UK side of things, although we face many of the same challenges as the US. And I managed a big program of ambassadors there, some of the first ambassadors to ever take part on Unibuddy as well. So I have personal experience of managing the platform too. Cool. Thanks, Maria. So before we kind of jump into the data and start to really drill down into the Unibuddy data and what it can teach us, I thought it would be useful just to take a few seconds to focus and question why data really matters in marketing. I mean, that statement itself is not going to come as a surprise to anybody. Everybody, I'm sure, is in agreement that data is hugely invaluable when building out marketing strategies, and particularly when it comes to understanding your audience. It's really essential to building out a strategy that's tailored and personalized to certain students and groups as well. I know that when I used to work in admissions in higher ed, and I apologize, I feel like my washing machine is extremely noisy, and if that's distracting the audio, please forgive me. When I used to work in admissions, I certainly felt at the time we had all the answers, and we were so sure that we knew exactly what students wanted. And in particular, we used to always feel that we kind of knew what students needed and what was stressing them out and what excited them. But actually, when we started to dig a bit deeper into our data and into the conversations that were taking place, we realized that actually there was a whole host of things we hadn't even thought of, hadn't even occurred to us. And so data can really inform our marketing, and especially in 2020, when this generation is truly very different to any that's come before. These students, they're looking for marketing content that is very authentic, very honest, and very real. And I think what they're often looking for is something that they can really relate to and that feels personal and tailored to them. And so when it comes to customizing and tailoring your approaches, that's where data can be really invaluable, because it helps you understand how particular segments of the world or particular student experiences demand particular responses. And it helps you often to be proactive rather than reactive in kind of building out a strategy and speaking to students in their voice and in a way that really connects with them and is really effective. So I'm going to hand over to Angel now, who's certainly our marketing expert on this webinar, to talk us through some of the tips and the advice that she would give for building out and using metrics to build a marketing strategy.
Great. Yeah, I mean, just to emphasize what Amy said, I think one of the most important things, even when I do with my clients, when I'm first looking to build a strategy for them, is to review the data and understand the different recruitment channels. Where are they getting students from? Where their enrollments are coming from and why? Because just analyzing that data will tell you such a story and then help you to build your strategy in a way that will just improve those enrollments. I definitely think that proven processes when it comes to converting leads and applications, looking at that data, I have had several schools, maybe they weren't large brands, but we found that, they had an alumni that was working at a high school or that was teaching. And it was all about looking at the data and understanding, okay, why are we getting so many students from Malaysia or from, Kuala Lumpur, diving deep into what city, what school, where everything where the student went, I think is so important when you're looking to build out your strategy. The importance of the post-application stage, admission sufficiencies and enrollment engagement, those areas, whenever you're getting your applications in, I work with schools and, they don't analyze where the applicants are coming from or what converted that student from a lead to an applicant. And I think even looking at your web analytics, what students are visiting, why they're visiting, and then what made them convert to an application, and then from an application to an enrollment. And I think the data and analysis, I find schools where they'll say, okay, we're going to spend money and we're going to go to, Europe, we're going to go on the European fair, and we're going to go to Brazil. And they've never actually looked at their data. They've never gotten students from those countries, versus saying, let me analyze what's currently happening. What are the top countries visiting my website? What are students, where did my applicants come from? Where did my enrollments come from? Instead of taking a look at their data and trying to dig deep on I call it the low hanging fruit, where, that's something that your data can tell you when you're processing and looking at all of your applications and enrollments.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Angel. And I think that makes a ton of sense. And certainly on the Unibuddy side, I know Yaya's going to hop into this in a minute, and we're about to ask a question here, but understanding and recognizing these trends, especially by region or by country, for example, I think that's where you can be really smart in actually thinking, okay, so I've noticed that all of our students, or many of our students from China, are asking questions about accommodation and about residences. So why don't we build out a tailored campaign specifically for them, all around the student living experience and around the accommodation, that when it gets to them, they feel it's really addressing a need and kind of, identifying something and speaking to something that they are feeling nervous about personally. So I think that's a really good point. And we've got a question now for the audience. So we're opening up to all of you. So please do fill this out. And the question is, how do you currently monitor student sentiment and insights? And feel free to pop your answers in the chat or in the Q&A. We're keeping an eye on it. So we're waiting for some responses to come in. Or maybe we have some shy attendees today. / they're all busy typing, I'm hoping. Awesome. So we've got some answers. I think we've got some answers coming in, which we're going to pick up as we go through. I think people are going to keep posting those as we go along. So we're going to switch to Yaya now, who's going to give us a bit of a deeper dive on the data while we wait for some of these answers to come in. So Yaya, awesome. Over to you.
Thanks, Amy. So yeah, I guess a nice title to start with, as we've exceeded 5 million messages on our Unibuddy platform. So let's take a look at some of the snippets of things we've learned through there. So it's nice to first start with seeing kind of how prevalent some of the words are on the platform. So we know some of these words have usually been asked by the US institutions, and kind of they want to get an idea of how common they are on our platform. And I guess when you see them next to each other, you can see which ones are more popular than others. But to start with, campus is quite a popular one. People usually do ask a lot of questions about this, with more than 12,000 instances of that. Coronavirus, one that we've definitely mostly been seeing in 2020, rising in certain cases too. You should expect your ambassadors and staff members to receive some questions about that, and to know exactly how your university is dealing with it and so on. And diversity as a theme is something that the university students care about as well, with 640 instances of that on the platform. And then one more we have is major, which we are almost at 10,000 instances of that just on our US platform. And now that we looked at all these words, I think it's important for us to also take a step back and realize that a lot of these words can mean different things in different contexts. And this is why we have kind of a machine learning algorithm in place at Unibuddy to go beyond that. And major is a good example. It's a homonym, which can mean different things in different circumstances. And part of those 10,000 could have been people saying, I want to join the major league, or that's a major bummer about a certain thing. So it's important for us to dig beyond that, for us to actually find out how important is the major that they're going to be studying to the students. So now another interesting thing we can do is to compare the topics that we look at Unibuddy from our European platforms, which is where we initially kind of had the platform set up, and then to see how that compares with the US. So to start with the European ones, we can see in the order that you're seeing here, this is how they all match next to each other in comparison, with major being the most important one there. This is the most important topic that the students are asking about. Exactly what am I going to be studying? Tell me a bit about the details, the learning style, how is your professor, and things like that. Second is the admissions process and kind of what do I need to do to get into this amazing university. Number three is the university itself. Tell me more about the reputation, the ranking, the location. What do I need to know more about this university that maybe I don't know from the website? Number four, an important one for European students is the money. So they're asking about kind of what does it take for me to get in? How much do I need to pay? You know, should I discuss this with my family? Is there opportunities for me to get financial aid? All these kind of questions are important for the students to ask as well. Then number five is the living. Things like the accommodation, where did you choose to live? Did you enjoy it? What would you recommend for someone like me? Number six is the careers. What kind of job am I going to end up with after this university and this major? And also maybe internships. These questions would fall there. And finally, the last one is social. Although many students do ask about it, it's kind of actually the least prevalent one in our platform, where they ask about the clubs and societies. Now, let's see how this kind of reflects onto the US. So the first one is major. Still, number one in the US is still the major one of major. Basically, this is where the students, again, are asking about kind of what is it like studying there in terms of the actual course. Are you enjoying it? Tell me more about the teaching styles and so on. With second, though, this is kind of the main difference, is money. So as you saw, it was number 4 on the European platform, whereas in the US, this is quite an important one, comes right after major. Students want to know how much is it for international students to move there, or even if you're domestic from another state, they're curious to know kind of what cost will I incur, and kind of my parents maybe want to know more about that. What are the opportunities for financial aid and things like that. Number 3 is admissions, which kind of still follows the same path as the European platform, but money kind of just interjects above it. Number 4, university, still following the same as before, which is quite nice and fascinating to see that, you know, students are alike regardless of many kind of circumstances, but money does really come up as more important for the US one. So it's important to equip your staff and your ambassadors with answers about that should you be using Unibuddy. And then after that is living, which also still actually follows, just with money going to the top there. And then after that is social. So slightly more important on the US platforms than it is on the European platforms is social. So again, this is where they're asking about the societies and clubs and what's it really like living there. How did you make friends and things like that. And then finally, you guessed it, is careers. Still an important one, of course. Many students will ask about that, but it's still the one that has the least amount of questions asked on the US platforms about where can I end up with after this university? What are your kind of plans after you attend this university? But of course, you'll expect that to maybe be more prevalent if they're speaking to alumni than if they're speaking to your current students.
Yeah, I'm going to just interject there with actually, we've got a poll going, so I'll ask it in a second. So we're just going to launch the first in our series of live polls, which is all about CRM. So if you guys can all fill this out, it would be really interesting and insightful for us. And then we're going to analyze the results quickly after this. So we're just going to wait for those to come in. Keep an eye on the results. I feel like we should have some countdown music here. I don't know if you guys know that the UK, it's a very British TV show called Countdown, which has a very famous countdown number to build up some suspense. While we're waiting for that, there was a question that came through on the chat from Paige that I wanted to address, and also to ask Angel as well for her input on this and her feedback. So Paige was asking, what type of social media posts do we think would be most helpful to help, to use with this kind of insights? And looking at all these different topics, I guess there's lots of different angles and approaches that universities can take. And, some topics are perhaps a bit more challenging, a bit more delicate than others. You know, money, for example, is something that requires specific approaches when you're dealing with students. But it'd be really cool, Angel, to hear from you, you know, if you've worked on any particular social media campaigns or anything around this with universities, and if there's anything that you've seen to work particularly well.
I definitely think we've done a lot of social media marketing, and I definitely think anything that has to do with contests and scholarships are definitely very popular. I think the more authentic the post, you know, I know everybody tends to lean towards more a nice, visually creative, fancy ad or magazine or excuse me, picture or video, but actually students want to hear authenticity. They want to see that the students are actually giving is real students. It's a lie. It doesn't need to be a fancy video. It can be just simply something that really can relate to them. I definitely think now, you know, with TikTok and all these different social media channels, you see students want to hear directly from other students. So I definitely think the more authentic it can be and real, those are definitely important areas to focus on when doing any type of campaign, especially on social media.
Awesome. Yeah, I totally agree. And something that we find to work really well is, I mean, video is just so popular now, even if it's really short, you know, 7 seconds, 10 seconds. It amazes me and makes me feel really old when I see how quickly and easily students create content on TikTok, which I don't even understand how to set up my account on TikTok, let alone how to create some really engaging content. But they're so creative. And I think something that we often notice, you know, now that we work with so many different universities around the world is actually, you know, you can have 5 ambassadors creating social content around the same topic, the same theme, but actually it can all be completely different because their perspective on it, their experience of it can create something really authentic and completely different. And actually it provides a really broad spectrum of experiences, which I think is really where social posts can be really impactful and really powerful.
Yeah,
So
I definitely think I've done a few lives, like going live. I mean, even now, I know a few schools that have done it in New York and just letting a student takeovers, going live on Instagram, going live on Facebook. You're going to get definitely a strong response because it's real and it's authentic. And especially in the days of media now, you know, students want to see what's actually happening at the moment. So those types of things really work.
yeah, totally. And we always say from Unibuddy's perspective, a little bit rough and ready is great. We have a word at Unibuddy that we call flawsome. That is essentially something that's a little bit flawed, but it's still completely awesome because it might not be perfect, but actually that feels a lot more real and a lot more honest than something that is super polished and really, you know, really ready to go and really professional. Thanks so much. So we've had the results of the first poll, and it's a neck and neck tie, I have to say, between Slate and Salesforce. So we've certainly got a lot of Slate and Salesforce users in here, some with Lucian and some with other. So really interesting. We can pick up perhaps on those two towards the end about how you incorporate your marketing into that and how you use those CRMs to connect with students. And we got a great comment/question from Stacey Barnes, which was that she'd be interested to see a similar breakdown, but looking at what the main topics are when it's prospect to student versus prospect to staff. I think that's a great point. And maybe Yaya, you can come in here and feed in on that. But we've seen a huge increase in the creation of staff profiles, you know, unsurprisingly since the outbreak of COVID. I think we have over 6,000 staff profiles now addressing all kinds of concerns. And certainly what we're finding is that students are going to different representatives for different things. I don't know, Yaya, if you want to fill us in a bit on that.
Definitely. Yeah, this is certainly, Stacey, something I'm very interested in constantly looking at. And it's the area we're still missing is, of course, having the similar timeline because we only recently went live with staff profiles. So when we do try to compare them, of course, we've allowed students to chat with current students for much longer. So we do kind of see some trends already with the type of themes of what's coming up. But, you know, when we're back in more precedented times, I guess, and months that are more across the year rather than focusing more on kind of like the winter and summer, we'll have a much better idea to objectively kind of compare the two. But, you know, there's no, I think, surprises in some of the trends we see where the students are going for the more kind of formal, more kind of administrative type questions to the staff, whereas they're really looking for the more authentic experiences from the students. and that's kind of the difference. And a little kind of fun one that we have been noticing already for the universities that use our chat bubble. So that's where you're able to select between chatting with a staff or a student as kind of a traffic driver that then takes you to the widget. We do see that almost in, I want to say in the majority of universities, they are clicking on staff a lot more, especially in the more recent times. So that's something fascinating to think about.
Yeah, and I think something that we've noticed is just this increase at the moment. I think it's the time of year, and that's compounded with the fact that there's a lot of uncertainty around, you know, enrolling, and everybody knows this, you know, the campus, you know, setup and the teaching style and everything seems to be very changeable. And I mean, that's a global challenge that everybody's facing and everyone's dealing with. But I think in times like that, students tend to gravitate and seek the reassurance of staff, more so sometimes than students. Which is really interesting and certainly, you know, something we've been noticing. We're going to go to another question because there's a great one from Paige, which is about trusting students. So she's asked, how would you approach a marketing team that is hesitant to use student content because they don't trust them? I think we're going to go to Angel first. I know you've worked with lots of universities providing consultancy and advice around this, and then I can share some insights from the Unibuddy side of things about how we support with that. So Angel, over to you.
Yeah, I've had some experiences with this. And I mean, of course, not every student is going to be a happy student, and not every student should be used for marketing. I think identifying the right student worker, the right student ambassador is really important. And sometimes the constructive criticism a student can give, maybe a student didn't have a great experience initially, but the school supported the journey. And it turned out that the student found a very, you know, there was a lot of positive areas that happened. And I think it is something that needs to be managed. Students need to be given a criteria of, you know, just a workflow and the do's and don'ts, just in general, as all students should when using social media or working for the university. But I definitely think identifying the right candidate, somebody that's going to represent the university in the right way. I've seen a lot of comments on student forums, and even some of the things that you were just saying about where faculty is being, or administration is being requested more, because sometimes the students can't answer the questions about COVID because the university hasn't even given their active students an answer. So I definitely think the university leading that and making sure they have an outline for the ambassador, and that's going to be very important. And then selecting the right individual that is available and can answer those questions.
Totally. I agree 100%. And on the Unibuddy side of things, we always emphasize training, and that's something that we offer on our side. So I mentioned full awesome, that's my favorite word, and I still use it when we host training sessions. But, you know, we recognize that for some universities, it can feel like a bit of a leap of faith, you know, to get out there and just put your students up publicly and to let them create their own content. So we provide quite comprehensive training. And I think, Angel, like you said, every single university will have students who are so passionate and really want to share their enthusiasm, their experiences. And I totally agree with your point about encouraging students to be honest, because actually that can be some of the most authentic and meaningful and impactful content that you can create when it's a story, it's a narrative that's compelling, it's something they can relate to, and actually it feels very real to them. It doesn't feel glossy and perfect. It feels normal and human. I think that's what we all look for, to be honest, in marketing these days. So that's certainly one thing. And also the way that Unibuddy works is when students upload their content and their social stuff, it comes to you first for approval. So you have a pair of eyes, you cast over it with a pair of eyes first before it actually goes up on the website. So even if you have a student who's new to doing it, it's quite easy to give them feedback and help them kind of understand how to produce great content that's, you know, grammatically correct and politically correct, etc., before it goes out into the big wide world. So I think there's elements there as well on the practical side that can hopefully give some reassurances and confidence to universities as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, Yaya, I'm going to let you carry on because I really interrupted you.
No worries, no worries. Let's go to the next slide. So back to kind of now looking at those topics, we just looked at how they vary globally, from looking at our EU platforms to the US platforms. And we saw mainly, I think the main takeaway is that money is much more important than it is in the EU. sorry, it's more important in the US platforms than it is in the EU, given that university has a reputation of being more expensive, and the data speaks for itself there. But now let's look at how the conversations differ between those who are pre-application, the prospects, or post-application. So when it comes to pre-application, what we do see, and one of our largest numbers on this slide, is that admissions is 46% more likely as a topic to those who haven't applied yet, which of course I think you can expect. They're asking questions about exactly how do I apply? What does it take? Do I have the right credentials to kind of apply to this university? So almost 50% more likely for those who haven't applied yet. Whereas money, also more prominent for those who haven't applied, and that's 32% more likely before you send your application to the university. You want to find out, what's this really going to take from my bank account? Can I really afford this? I really want to make sure that I'm applying to a place that I'm going to be able to afford, and potentially even look into financial aid if I'm able to. Now onto the post-application side, living and things like accommodation, the dorms, and kind of getting an idea of what's it like actually living at the university and the campus. 40% more likely for those who have already applied. So you've already submitted your application. This is something you start thinking of afterwards, perhaps while you're comparing different universities. Careers also comes up more after you've applied, perhaps as a good distinguisher between different universities. You want to find out from the current students and from the staff, kind of what are the prospects of after attending this university and maybe studying at the course. And then major, as we know, it's the most important one, still more prevalent for those who have already applied. They're asking more questions than those who haven't yet about the details of the major. And then the last two are university and social. So the university, again, this is just about the campus itself, the reputation, general questions that possibly students are focusing on more after they've applied, because they want to also base their decision on kind of that important criteria. Maybe between two different universities, it's kind of important for the ambassadors and staff to really kind of sell them on the dream of this university and show them that they can really belong there. And on the note of belonging, of course, is social, an important one for students to discuss, but more so after they've applied. Again, to give them that idea while they're comparing different universities. Are there clubs for people like me? Will I really feel like I belong? How did you make friends in your first year? Were people nice in your dorms? And things like that. So that kind of summarizes the difference between those who have already applied versus those who haven't yet.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Aya. I've got two more questions in the Q&A. One is for Angel and one is for you. So I'm going to do yours first, as you're on a roll. And it's about the actual data. So the stats and the data that we have in the presentation today, one of our attendees is keen to know, is this taken just from the Unibuddy chat or from the Unibuddy chat and the live events? So the live events is a feature that we offer. It's a group chat kind of live interactive platform that can be used to digitize events as well, just for context.
Yeah, very, very good question to the anonymous attendee there. So the data is actually for all the prospects who have chatted on our platform, regardless of where. So be it on the widget, on their mobile app, or as Amy mentioned, on Unibuddy Live. So that's kind of where all this data comes from. So we're able to kind of confidently say that any time the machine learning algorithm is able to track a certain question about a certain topic, we are covering all our different products where this can happen.
Awesome, thank you. And this one's for Angel. Do you have tips for colleges on where to start with looking into data?
I definitely think, I think one of the first steps is pulling all of your, I like to do a 3 to 5 year trend analysis. So I like to look at applications, not by nationality and by location. Sometimes we tend to forget that we'll have a lot of students coming from Europe, but maybe they're not of European descent. We'll have a lot of students coming from Canada, but they're not of Canadian descent. And I think that's something that a 3 to 5 year trend analysis on leads, prospects, applications, enrollments, and even the students that canceled or got denied. I think that would be the first step I would do. Depending on what CRM you use, that data can be stored. I understand universities that it can be challenging. I've worked with universities that everything was kept on Excel. So I definitely think looking at some trend year over year is important. And so that would be like the first step I would do is pull all of your enrollment data, see your matriculations. Like there's schools that will have a lot of applications, but then they don't realize that their own admissions inefficiencies or their requirements are turning students away. So you can look at that by seeing your application to your enrollment matriculation. Those are things are important. I mean, I think international students now, they're always going to apply to more than one university. Post application engagement is just as important as pre-application engagement and analysis. So that would be the first step that I would do when analyzing, like starting to analyze the data, and even having your admissions counselors and sit down and kind of analyze their pipelines and what they're working on now, and tell the story. I mean, there's a lot of touch points on the application, so you can even see schools that they came from, and really dig deep into that data analysis.
Awesome, thank you so much. And it's interesting you just talking about trends, because this really nicely leads on to our next slide, which looks at some of these conversational topics over a longer period of time. So it's really interesting, as Yaya was saying, to notice, trends in pre and post application in terms of what subjects come up and what students are worried about, what they want to find out about. And so on the Unibuddy side, we do a lot of this kind of longer term analysis, and we use conversational insights to analyze how these change over time. And as you can see here with the university and social, some of these peaks and troughs are to be expected. So we know that for university, questions around the university, they previously have peaked in October, which makes a lot of sense. It's the beginning of an application cycle. It's the beginning of a new journey for lots of students. It's when they begin their search, and they just have, I think, lots of questions generally about the overall experience. They just want to gauge, will I fit in here? Will I enjoy this place? Does it tick my important boxes when I'm choosing a university? And then what we also see for social is that it peaks around the summertime. So last year we saw an uptick in this in the summer and also in the spring. I think this also makes a lot of sense, because in what normally people think of as quite a quiet period in between deadlines, between the kind of May 1 and the enrollment deadlines, it tends to be quite quiet. There's no other major deadlines. It's really about students who've made their decision kind of preparing to start their journey. But actually, this is when the social questions matter the most, because this is when students are like, oh my God, I've made this decision. This is my life now. I need to actually start thinking about how I'm going to meet people and how I'm going to, build a new life for myself, and how will I go about trying new things or learning a new language or taking up a new hobby or traveling, and all of these, small but really important parts of a journey to university, and a really big factor when choosing somewhere. So what's really interesting though in 2020, and you can see this in the trend on the graph, is that we've seen a significant uptick, especially in the university questions in June, so June 2020, but also for social as well. And you'll see compared to last year, this is significantly higher. And I think this is a reflection, quite honestly, of COVID and of the challenges that students have been facing, where they have no other way really to find out about university. They can't visit, they can't get that, first person experience where they walk around the campus and they talk to other students. And so for us, it's been amazing just to see such a significant uptick in these topics. And over the course of the fall as well, of course, we'll keep analyzing and keep examining this, but it's certainly a sign of the times, I think, to see these kinds of topics increasing in importance, and the need for this kind of information in a digital way is certainly quite interesting as well.
Yeah, I can just add a couple areas, and I've noticed this just being in admissions for the past 10 years and watching applicants go to accepted, right, and even to enrolled. I noticed a lot of my clients, there's been more of a trend in the summer where students are deciding, should I actually go to this school, or should I they've been accepted to 5 or 6 schools. I do know that some agencies are applying students to more than one school. There's a lot of competition, especially in the US. Where students will get acceptance letters from 5, 6 schools, and then they'll be deciding, and they're asking a lot of questions about that school and why should I go, which is very different than like the UK and Europe, right? There's not as many choices. So I definitely can see in the admission cycle more enrollments not starting in the melt that's happening at universities, where that's why it's still important to engage them even after they've been accepted. Because they're still deciding. I always tell my clients, just because you've accepted them does not mean that they're going to come to your school. There's 6 or 7 other schools that have accepted them, and that's when I think students are deciding, which one to attend.
I think that's such a good point, and certainly something that we've worked quite closely with some of our Unibuddy partners on is providing kind of best practices and templates and advice on how to be creative with your marketing around that quiet, kind of traditionally kind of dead period. I mean, I know it's exhausting because universities, you get to May 1 and you're like, finally, I can take a breath and I can relax. But actually, in some ways, the work just begins at that point when you go into the summer months. And like you say, Angel, you know, students could have multiple schools that they're considering. And it's around that time, I think that's when it's really about building the sense of belonging and really generating this consistent sense of excitement about all aspects of that experience at that particular school, what they can expect, how they can meet people, you know, what they can get involved in, you know, how excited and proud they should be to be going to that school. I think it's a really interesting period in the cycle that there's a lot of potential for. And certainly there's a lot of quick wins, I think, and things you can do, you know, using your existing students and encouraging them to build up content as well. That could be really effective.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, you know, looking back, you know, 10 years ago, the market wasn't as competitive. You didn't have as many schools recruiting international students. Over the past 5 years, it's really changed, you know, and that's where I feel like, you know, just because a student's been accepted, the enrollment engagement is so important. And I've talked to, you know, several clients of mine have suggested, you know, having welcome meetings with provosts and things like that. They're really intimate situations. You can do these things virtually. Letting them talk to the dean of the school, involving them doing something special for those in accepted students day, you know, just additional things that you can offer is going to be really important, but just because of the competition out there now.
Totally agree. Yeah, absolutely. So we've just launched another poll, which is about generating leads and inquiries. This is a hot topic and certainly something I know that everybody's doing in one way or another. So if you can all fill that out, it would be hugely appreciated. And certainly we'd love to see your responses to that. We'll give you a few minutes to go through there. And then while we're waiting, I think we could answer a question. We've got a question from Lou, which is the summer melt. What's the best way to reduce summer melt and COVID-19 defer melt? Oh, that's a mouthful. COVID-19 defer melt. Angel, I'm gonna call on you for this one. I feel you have some great tips for this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually just did a webinar for Indian students about the deferred melt, because a lot of students in India, with the embassies being closed and all the students for fall deferring, for fall 20 deferring to, you know, to spring and fall 2021, there's a lot of questions around that. I definitely think universities and missions right now, the communication and transparency is going to be very important. Pushing back, you know, I know we have early action and all of these dates that we hold, sometimes very black and white, where it's on our website, but if we have flexibility to do rolling admissions, anything that you're doing for students, it needs to be intimately talked about with those students. And I have a client that I work with, and you know, we're doing a lot of one-on-ones with students. We are doing a lot of group sessions with deans, and I just think that transparency and that communication is going to be very, very important right now. For summer melt, you know, I always say to stay engaged with the student. I mean, I always think that the summer, whenever, as soon as they've been accepted, and I look at those KPIs very closely with my clients, and we watch, you know, if you don't have an enrollment deposit, it would probably be a good time to incorporate one. I know there's schools that don't require seat deposits and enrollment deposits, but that KPI can really tell you who's dedicated to come to your school. That's something that I implement with all my clients. I think before you know, when you're going to issue the I-20, the student should have left some type of enrollment deposit. So I think that can help you understand who's committed in going to your school. And if students aren't paying an enrollment deposit, but they've been accepted, the odds are they're looking at other schools. I have seen schools doing surveys to students, and then just really having that open Q&A with them, where you're even asking them those questions, and pre-departure sessions, seeing your attendance, seeing how engaged your accepted students are will be really important to determine who will actually be starting on your campus.
I think that's Absolutely hit the nail on the head, and such a good point. I think this idea of just being consistent and being consistent and persistent in how you're communicating with students is always going to be effective. And I think right now over communicating is what's required, because there's so much uncertainty and so much unpredictability right now in the market and even in the application cycle. I think it's just for universities, it's an easy win just to be visible to them and accessible. And
Yeah.
like you say, Angel, having kind of group discussions, that's something we've seen lots of our Unibuddy partners doing, using Unibuddy Live, for example, to do really informal Q&As or to do information sessions that they run on a weekly basis. So they're constantly promoting that to their students, breaking down some of those kind of boundaries and barriers, even between staff and students, and just ensuring that if they do have questions, they feel that there's a human at the end of the line that they can talk to, and someone that's there. It's not just an email address, it's a real person, and they have information and guidance as well. So I think that's a really, really good point, and definitely something that would be of benefit.
Yeah.
So we've got our poll 2 results in, and this one was all about how you're generating leads, and email marketing is the winner only by 1 point or 1 vote. So email marketing and also events, which is really interesting. So events and email marketing were neck and neck, followed closely by advertising as well. And I mean events, I think this is something really interesting that is proving problematic, going into the fall semester, when we're not able to host in-person events, or if we are, everything has to be socially distanced and everything has to be meticulously planned and organized on a kind of schedule or a rota basis. I think it's been really interesting to see, and quite challenging to overcome that and to kind of deal with that. And like everything in higher ed, I feel it's creeping up on us, whether we like it or not, kind of out of the blue. We've got a question from Stacey here, which is, do you have any stats? I think this is probably best suited to Yaya. So do you have any stats related to what percentage of chats are coming from new prospects, so not in the system, versus prospects or applicants versus accepted students or admitted students?
Yeah, very good question. This definitely differs based on the region and the universities. I don't know the numbers now at the top of my head, but Stacey, very happy to maybe pick this up via email if you'd like to contact me, and I can give you maybe more specific numbers based on different countries or sizes of universities and so on. So I'm just Yahya at unibuddy.com, and we can take it from there.
Awesome. Cool. So if we that was 2 words in one. Flip to the next slide, which is that was a spoiler there, a teaser. It's a trivia round. And taking our kind of roadshow theme into account, we've got a question about Route 66. So it's going to be a first answer wins. So first correct answer wins in the chat. So everybody start your engines. No my roadshow pun there. And Maria, I think we're ready for the slide. Okay. Oh, and the prize is a $50 gift card. Oh my gosh. I think oh wow, everyone's very fast. Okay. I can't actually get back. Okay, so I think I have a winner, Maria, but I know that yeah. Okay, so our winner is Janae Ice. Congratulations, virtual round of applause to you. The answer, oh, loud applause, there we go. The answer is indeed cars, and you are the glorious winner of our $50 voucher. So congrats, just before the end of the session as well, just in time. Thanks everybody for answering that one, taking part in that. And then we've got some questions now, although I know that we are a little bit over. So we might be able to squeeze a couple in. I think if some people can still hang around for these questions. So this is a question for the audience really, but I think also we can ask Angel again. And it's about tailoring marketing. So does anybody in the audience here tailor their marketing, and if so, how? Please do share with us in the chat. And I'm going to ask Angel as well, have you seen any particularly good examples of universities who've tailored their marketing in a really strategic way that's given them great results?
I mean, I've definitely seen a lot of schools. I mean, I think for international recruiting, the way you speak to a student from China is very different than the way you would speak to a student from Brazil. They're different, as you showed in some of your data. There's different goals based on different regions of the world. so I've seen a few schools, like I know that Arizona State University, there's a few big ones that do a really good job, but I've even seen small ones cater their marketing strategies towards specific regions. They've done stuff in different languages, where some of their email marketing is in, you know, Chinese and Spanish. And I think you're also catering to the parent, especially at the undergrad level. I know undergrad recruitment is very important right now. So you're catering to the parent as well. And the majority of the parents do not speak English. So even though the students may have attended the best boarding school, the parents usually don't. So I think having different languages available, representatives that can speak in different languages, I think those types of things are very important when separating the regions of the world.
Awesome. I think that's such a good point. And I think from something that we've seen from the Unibuddy perspective that's worked well is tailoring around particular programs from quite early on in the cycle. So identifying, you know, your group of students who are interested in a particular program, and then using a Unibuddy ambassador who is a current student on that program as a kind of program ambassador. And what they do is, or what they have done in the past, is to actually position it in the first person from the perspective of that student. So it feels really personal, it feels quite informal, as if it's just a kind of friend or a peer reaching out to give insights and advice. And certainly that kind of approach, where the student is leading it and it feels like it's coming from the student, they've seen a significant boost in their click-through and in the overall engagement with that kind of content. They often use something visual as well, like a photo of the student or a photo of their profile, which I think is quite simple, and that's not tailoring, but I guess that's just making it more visual, so it speaks to the audience and engages them quite quickly. I know that with Generation Z, you want to avoid too much text ever, and keep it, you know, short and snappy and visual, so that you can engage them at that crucial 8-second point. Otherwise, sometimes you risk losing them.
Definitely.
Awesome. And I can see we've got Jerome gave some feedback on that question, which is really interesting, which is we send different messages regarding scholarships because of specific scholarships offered to out-of-state students. So I think that's a really great example of just looking at even the domestic tailoring between your out-of-state versus your local versus your international. And something like scholarships, it's quite a sensitive issue. You know, it's quite a personal and a kind of private thing that students often want to discuss. It's quite a delicate matter to be marketing about. So I think that makes a lot of sense, and I can see how that would be really impactful and speak to the audience in the right way as well.
Yeah, I definitely would agree. I mean, even thinking about, there's so many universities that don't contact their prospects. They don't call them, they don't chat with them, you know, they really wait for them to start filling out an application or become active or reach out to them. And I definitely think now more than ever, it's important to engage prospective students and leads and people that are visiting your website. That's something, we live in a very service industry, right? Where the students are our customers. And that's something that I always remind schools is these are your customers, and giving them different ways to engaging them. And a lot of schools I've worked with will set up student workers where they'll actually call and do lead verification, similar, you know, to what you guys are doing at Unibuddy, right? Where they're verifying information, they're connecting with them, almost like we're a friend in America. And a lot of times that's set up with student workers, and it's almost just simply like an intro call for the school, and answering any questions. And definitely agree with the chatting, WhatsApp groups, those things are very important. You know, I didn't have a fancy Unibuddy when I first started developing this. So I had to kind of do the old fashioned ways where it was just, you know, WhatsApp groups. But I definitely think what you guys are doing, like what Unibuddy has, is definitely great for students because it's a way to engage as soon as they visit the website. And I really think that's so important.
Sure. Thanks so much, Angel. We have another question in the Q&A section, which is all about high school visits, which these are fast approaching, as we're all aware, on the horizon. And like many events, I know that lots of universities and lots of our partners are kind of pivoting and transferring these online to make them virtual. And this question is, how would we suggest having virtual high school events? I'm struggling to find out how to best do that and to get the leads I need. So I think we can maybe approach this from the Unibuddy side, and then maybe if Angel has any tips or advice On the Unibuddy side of things, you know, many of our partners are using the live events with video streaming to digitize their high school visits. So using the platform, they can live stream presentations, they can do live Q&As, they can create custom kind of breakout spaces and individual rooms where students can connect with each other, as well as current students and staff at the university. So that's definitely proving to be the most popular, and certainly what's useful about that is that you can generate and store the leads that you're capturing. So any students that are signing up to take part in that, you have that lead or that information, and you can continue nurturing it, and the student can continue connecting and speaking to students on the platform. So that's certainly how we've been supporting our current partners to move their events online. But Angel, do you have anything to add maybe in terms of how to promote these kinds of events, or how to connect with the right audiences, you know, generally how to get the word out there to the students?
Yeah, I definitely think with high schools, I mean, high schools are going through some of the similar things that universities are going through. So those high school college counselors are looking for assistance and help. And I mean, I know one of the things my team and I do, we have groups for high school counselors abroad at the different international schools, and we'll actually reach out to them individually and say, you know, we can host something for your students. It doesn't have to be school specific. How can we help you? And I think having group sessions, definitely live sessions, virtual events, I mean, they're looking for assistance. They're definitely trying to keep these high school, these juniors and seniors busy, and looking for different ways to engage them with universities. So because they normally would have university fairs. So definitely creating a relationship with the high school counselors, I think, is very important. And it a lot of times it doesn't always have to be about just your school in the information session. It can also be about, you know, hosting a session on essay writing or admissions best practices. And I think those counselors, and just the responsiveness that we have gotten over the past, you know, 5 months with some of the high school counselors we talk to, you know, they'll be very honest, like either, you know, now's not the time, or let's set something up. And I think I've done a lot of virtual events, and I think sometimes the large virtual fairs, it depends on the institution. If you're a big branded institution, they can work very well from you. If you're a mid-sized, smaller institution, a smaller event may be best, and something that you host specifically. So those are some of my suggestions, just when it comes to virtual outreach with high schools.
I think they're all great, and I totally agree and second your suggestion to do kind of study skills. I think that's a really nice and really helpful and like seriously impactful way to connect with students. And the jump from high school to university is massive for so many students, and something that certainly I know we know they worry about. We know it makes them anxious, and it's something that they have to adjust to. So those kinds of sessions can be great and fun, and also a skills-based session is never going to be a bad thing. It's always going to be helpful to students, and will help to build a connection with the school in a way that isn't purely kind of applications or admissions focused as well.
And I think the more authentic, we did a webinar in June with one of my clients about, you know, Chinese students in America. We all know what's happening with China, and I think we had over 200 students attend, and it was our own event that we marketed. And I definitely think the more transparent and honest you can be with students right now is so important. Don't let the media lead your recruiting strategy. That's the best advice I can give you. You can lead that. As in the institution that hosted that, it went very well. And that transparency is so important, especially coming from American institutions right now.
I totally agree. I even lost my voice there. I was so agreeing so much. No, I think it's so true. And this generation of students, said it at the beginning, but I'll say it again, they want authentic information, and they truly see through, you know, the more traditional marketing methods. They're really savvy, they know what they want, and they see right through, you know, some of the more traditional formats and messaging and tone of voice that we've used in the past. So whether we like it or not, I think, you know, they see it for what it is. So I think there's nothing to lose from being honest with them and building those connections that way.
Yeah, it's really important now with COVID. You know, you have to have a session. Let's talk about COVID. Let's talk about New York City. Let's talk about what's happening on our campus. And even if you don't know all the answers, I think just having that candid conversation and type of webinars will just help relieve a lot of anxiety from students, and it'll definitely draw attention. So, that's something where there are a lot of hard questions being asked with everything that's going on in the US. So I definitely think those type of transparent webinars, asking where students are going to ask hard questions are important.
Totally. Absolutely. I can't believe an hour. I feel like it's completely flown by, but here we are. We have a minute to wrap up, so I'm going to try not to speak incredibly fast here. But I think it'd be hard to summarize everything we've talked about really succinctly here at the end. But these are just a few of the takeaways from the session today and just generally from our kind of knowledge and experience with data insights and marketing. The first one is just to remember that data and insights aren't, just nice to haves or nice things to look at. As Angel was saying, they can really form the basis of an entire strategy, and they can show you things and guide you in the directions that you take and the approaches that you take, and also the type of content that you use with the students as well. And taking in certain factors such as location and course and where students are at in their application. This will all impact what students want to know and when. And so the more you understand about, what they want to know at what stage of the cycle, the more proactive you can be and the more creative you can be as well in building those connections and sharing that information. And something we'd always recommend, obviously, on the Unibuddy side, but just generally, I know that Angel, I think, would recommend this as well, is just always keeping tabs and regularly checking the engagement and sentiment of your students, whether that's conversational insights, email engagement stats, or just general things like website traffic. These kinds of data and these metrics will help you understand the student journey and specifically your individual kind of digital journey. So how are students digitally interacting with your university? What is their journey feeling like? And how can you maybe enhance certain elements of it or really hone in on particular touch points or moments in the cycle? And then finally, is the information, and this one seems obvious, but actually it's really important, is the information your students need readily available and easy to find? They have an 8-second attention span and they are not looking. They hate looking. They hate searching. I know we had to find out the hard way. When I was working in higher ed, it took us a long time to kind of accept that they weren't reading the stuff we were sending, or they certainly weren't interacting with our website in the way that we hoped or the way we assumed. And as soon as we realized that, we were able to kind of revisit that, and we realized we had to take a multi-channel approach and really kind of tap into all of these different channels and platforms to make sure you're connecting with as many students as possible as well. So that's everything from us. I hope I wasn't too fast at the end there. I want to say a huge thanks from Unibuddy to Angel for taking part in the session. Your insights were incredible and so useful and interesting. And thank you to everyone who attended for all your great questions, your poll responses, and your comments as well. And of course, if you have any other questions or anything you'd like to know after this, please don't hesitate to get in touch with us. We look forward to hearing from you. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.